You know how you get these YouTube reviews and everything's, oh, it's so wonderful and so on, and go to my Patreon page, or go to the sponsor that does this, blah 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 blah, and everything is so wonderful, and it seems like it's a perfect world. I'm going to tell you right now, this is not one of those reviews. After almost 30 years, my old offset smoker or sidebox smoker, it was reaching its due end. Okay, and so the wife bought me a new one. I told her I need something smaller. We don't need the big massive thing, because it's just the two of us anymore. We don't have the nieces, nephews. We don't do the weekend barbecue parties or anything. All of the soldier friends have since rotated out many years ago. So we need something small and fairly inexpensive. Because, it's just the two of us. I'm not going to be using it almost every weekend. Well, I may, but that's just me. I like my smokers. So she bought one. It was about $100 or about €90 on Amazon. And to tell you the truth, the thing was a piece of crap. I've spent 4 days renovating it, and now it's done. So let's go through everything, the bad stuff and all the other things, and then see how it turned out. So the first thing that I noticed when I unpacked this, and I was looking at the parts, is this is a piece of crap. Okay, especially for what we paid for it. If you notice here, there's a gap running right through here, all the way around, where they put a little tack weld there and a little tack weld here. And the little tack welds, then they tack welded it, then they ground it down so that this is happening. See that? The stuff's not even held on. So you have smoke that can come all out here. And it's the same as on all of this. Every dang piece of it. So I had to get a wire brush and clean everything. And I'm going to have to run a weld around this edge to seal it and to secure it. Because once this heats up, that little piece of metal is going to expand, and if this is already broken loose, once that gets hot from the wood, that's going to break open and do the same, and then all my hot wood's going to fall out. There's nothing down here. They didn't even tack a bottom piece. They just slapped it on here, put those two pieces, and the stuff is not even, I don't know if you can tell. Look at that. It's not even even. Okay. And they did this with all of it. See that gap in there? I can literally hold this up and see sunlight through it. And they did this with all the pieces. This piece is going to have to be re-welded. Let me get a focus here. There. See, one little tack, then they ground it down. So I had to clean those off. This only had one tack. The other one's already broke. I will never buy anything from this company again. Look at that. How do you hold smoke in there? And what that's supposed to do is you're supposed to take this little piece of thin stuff, stick it in here, and then and if you look, this is already warping. So this is just going to drop down into there once it gets hot enough. And everything's going to slide off. You can't put any liquids or anything on here because it's uneven. The second one is drilled even worse, and again, does not fit properly. So we've got to fix this. A smoker is supposed to hold and channel smoke and heat. That does not hold and channel smoke and heat. That goes right out the back. Another piece is here. Look at this. That's how that's supposed to take and be on there. Screwed into their holes. They don't even have this thing on here straight. So I've cleaned this off, and I'm going to have to make a second piece that runs across here so that when this is closed, it overlaps. This is just fucking unacceptable. Just unacceptable. And again, this is not what the picture showed. So my next problem is this is not level. Okay, one, I put the larger wheels on it. But even with the smaller wheels, it wouldn't have set exactly level. And I want to be able to adjust that instead of just putting something underneath to stack it. I want to be able to adjust it, because what I've done is using a piece of bar steel and a hammer, I've made an indentation here. So what I want to do is raise this and then be able to adjust it so that all my liquids flow down here, pool and flow out here. I don't want it backing up in here. I don't want it backing up in here. If it gets down into here next to this fire, it can ignite and cause an internal fire. We don't want that. So what I've done is I went and got some of these. And I'm going to straighten this out and bore these holes a little bit bigger to fit my M6 screws. So I'll be back in a minute when I've got that done. So using my basic bench vise, I straightened that. And now I am going to use my drill and turn those M5s into M6 holes. So now I've made 2 of these. And the next thing we got to do is make the adjustment screws. To do that, I've got to have some M8 screws and a series of different washers that I'm going to use to make the feet. And for this, I'm going to have to tack weld these together. So I'll be back in a bit. So now that we've got the 2 rings washers done, I have a little washer nut here, and I'm going to tack weld the nut into here, but I'm going to do it in such a way that I can get the bolt back out. This is simply to hold it so I can do a couple of tacks real quick on it, and then I'll take the bolt out and finish welding it. So this is what we're dealing with. The bolt goes through. This sits onto the leg. I'll show you that in a minute. This allows me to adjust it up and down. This is going to go into here for the foot. And voila, we have an adjustable foot that we can put onto the leg. So let me get this done, I'll get the other one done, then I'll show you how I put them together. So there they are. I'm going to trim that screw off right here later, but it's not bothering anything, so. And then all I have to do is turn this screw to get it to adjust up and down. And so that's how those feet work. So I drilled the legs a little bit larger, the holes. I ran a 15 millimeter aluminum alloy rod through it. Then I put a couple little screws on each end, and those act as a brake to keep this from spinning. So the other piece was a little thin piece of thing that the legs literally would bounce, and it would bulge in here, and it was rubbing against here, just wearing this down. This now prevents that, because this will now roll in the internal axle, which is 2-3 times thicker than the original, on the metal wheels. And there's no rubbing going on in here. And I've only got this much play between the tires left and right, so they're not and then rubbing against the side over here, and then going back the other way and rubbing against the side over here. And it's just, it was a fiasco. All right, so we got that fixed. Onward. In here, if you remember, they had these little things that literally set into holes, and then they sat there and just was wibbly wobbly until they rubbed against the inside over here, and normally that was at an angle and they were uneven. What I did is, first of all, I chopped those little nubs off that ran into those holes. We're going to use this later. Then I took a piece of L-bar, and with it turned so that that was on the top like that, I ran 2 pieces into it, across here and one across here, and that covered up all of those holes back there, so I'm not losing any smoke or heat that way. Then what I did is, all the screws that went in, that they had for the legs and everything, they had these little bitty wire washers. And it was literally, you could look through and see the sunlight coming through them, even when the washers and everything was in there, because they had drilled the hole so large. So I took some larger washers, inset those, and put those, and that closed all those gaps off. We then, excuse my welding, my hands shake a lot, so I can't do a steady weld anymore. But we fixed this piece that was broken and welded all the way around. I mean, this stuff, it's smooth. It just looks rough because that's all the paint drops and stuff where I was painting. Did that. And then repaired that so that it actually fits for the airflow. All right, next thing. Those little bitty brass hinges that they gave us, I replaced those with some good heavy steel ones, and instead of putting those little bitty brass screws in, I tack welded it all in. So that's in place. I did the same with this one. That also covered up all of those offset drill holes that they had in here for the little brass hinges that they had on it. Once that was done, we then went to the next part. That was their table. Those 3 little pieces. And as you can tell, this is already cracking over here. The stuff is unfinished. So we got rid of that. And I put a nice thick piece of steel, graded steel. You notice this is square grade. It's not that wonky diamond shaped stuff. It makes it easier to clean if anything does get into it. These are bolted down onto here. And then I'm going to make an aluminum tray that will have a bend on each side and will slide onto this. So that'll be my working surface, and then the aluminum tray can go into the dishwasher. But this right here gives me that stability that I need, especially in the center. Because this stuff was so wobbly, it would just fold in anytime. If I put anything on here, these would take in still with that wood, they would want to do this business. And this holds everything in place by being bolted in with 4 instead of 6 bolts. And once again, extended washers. Got rid of all that chintzy brass and small light steel shit. All right, that was the basics on those. The next thing that we had was this. This was what they gave me to keep my wood on. And as you notice, it just slides in there. Also, if you will look here, you will notice I have very little airflow able to, if I had wood stacked in here, I would have no airflow because the wood and so on would block the airflow. So, one, I have a problem with this thing continuously shifting, and my wood and coals and so on, and this is so large, I could not put smaller chips into it. So we got rid of that. I went and got the same piece of steel that I used here. I doubled it and put 4 feet on it, adjusted the size, and this goes into here. This sits flat now. It doesn't go anywhere. And you'll notice I now have airflow underneath to the wood stock and everything above it. And I've still got plenty of room up here that I'm going to backstock. I can backstock the wood toward the back and still have plenty of smoke airflow coming into here. This right here is far too large in my opinion, but I couldn't really do anything with that unless I re-welded that whole section and put in a new piece of metal to crimp that. I really wanted it to be about half that size. I may still run a piece of bar metal in here, but that'll give me a gap in here and then my smoke will escape. So it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't issue. So we got rid of that. Then on the I got a piece of stainless and cut it to size. And it goes in and sits flat in there. Now I have my smoke and so on. If I want to raise the smoke and I want to get more smoke under it, that's why I kept these. These are raised up. And so I can literally then put individual pieces on here. And I have that additional space underneath here for that smoke to get in, depending on what I'm cooking. So on here I can cook the finer stuff. Up here I can cook the larger stuff and get more of a smoke. And with these, I can run them in either direction that I want. Depending on what I'm cooking. So that covered all those holes. It made all this level. It gave me a secure bedding. I didn't have these little things just sitting in those holes and just wibbly wobbling all over the place. And you couldn't put a decent amount of weight of meat on there. And out of that, by modifying those, I've got an extra raised set for to do stuff up to get more smoke underneath the bottom if I want. So all of that was done. We had to re-weld all of this for the smokestack. I replaced their little hex screw, their little hex nut, with an actual wing nut so we can actually adjust this properly. Again, we had to repair the broken tack welds. We welded everything around. Everything is now sealed up. And there's only one problem left on this, but we'll get to that in a minute. The next thing I did was they gave us this was the handle. And so what I did is I rummaged my old one, and these are metal. These are metal. So now these are metal with the wood up here, and I'm not have that little thin screw that every time I tried to grab it, I would be burning my hand against the hot. So we replaced that one, we replaced that one, and we replaced the one on the lid. So that got fixed. And that's about it on that. Now, my remaining problem, this stuff was so warped and so light that, remember, I had a gap in here. So I tack welded a new piece of metal to extend that and bent it so that it actually overlaps and closes. So now I don't have this gap in here with all my smoke and heat coming out. The dilemma is, if you'll notice here, this stuff is so light, it doesn't want to sit. And what I did with that is I made these little latches here. So this can come down. And that holds it. I've got to reshape this a little bit to cut down on the smoke. But that's just a little bit of slightly bending the edge down so that it sits firmly against this. That I'll be doing today. And now this holds in place, and when I want, even with my mitts, I can just flip that, put my wood in, and as this is I would pull the handle down with one and with my other hand lock it into place. You'll notice this up here is the same problem. So I did the same thing to it. Each of these has their own little thing. And once again, now that all of this is in place, you'll see I've still got a little bit of work to do right along here to bend that down so that it matches. And that's going to reduce 99% of all that heat and smoke loss that we would have been getting. So now we need to fire it up after I do my tweaking on the lids and see what we've got. However, in short, I would never buy anything like this again from Amazon. Again, I don't blame Amazon itself, but they have no quality checks. And this is just a prime example. The only reason I did not send this back was so that I could do this video. That's how PO'd that I was. That I would put 4 days of effort into revamping just to be able to see how messed up it was. This is some powdered stuff I put in there. I wanted it to really smoke so I could see what was going on and make sure I was getting all that done. So there we go. Of course, we've still got some, you'll notice very little smoke is now coming out over here. I've still got some smoke coming around here, but now the majority of the smoke is coming out up here instead of along all those holes and along the legs and everything else. So we've reduced that heat, we've increased the heat retainment and reduced the smoke loss dramatically by making those alterations.